Genius. What do you think of when you hear the word genius? A lot of people think of Albert Einstein. Some people might think of Madame Curie, Sir Isaac Newton. They often think of scientists. Not that all geniuses are scientists, and not that all scientists are geniuses. But a lot of the great scientists were geniuses. And I've been privileged to teach a few geniuses in my time, and I will still, in future videos, speak about some of them. But the first genius I met in my teaching career was a lady by the name of Miss S. And Miss S was my head of department at a school in Pretoria when I just started teaching high school science. So, albeit that I'd been in technical colleges for 10 years, I was new to teaching science on high school level. Now, I must say she was a force of nature. She was a tiny little lady, but you basically had to sprint to keep up with her when she walked toward her class. And her mind was even faster than her walk. I didn't quite realize how smart she was initially. She was very humble and very friendly and very, 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 very helpful. But it wasn't too long that I realized that I was dealing with someone that was definitely in a different intellectual league to where I batted, if I can use a cricket analogy. She later on left teaching for a few years and went on to study further to become a nuclear physicist. And that in itself tells you what sort of intellectual caliber she was. But she was as kind as what she could be. She was as tough as nails. They say dynamite comes in small packages. Well, she was dynamite. I have never in my entire teaching career seen a teacher who scares children as much as what she did. And not necessarily in a bad way. The children just had, they were scared of her. They were like, you don't mess with Miss S because she's going to take you out. And one of the remnants of my time working with her is something that I still practice to this day, not quite to the extreme that she did, and that is the use of a stamp. Now, I often joke with my students and say that in my previous life I worked for the post office because I have a stamp, and when I check homework at the beginning of most lessons, then I walk from student to student and I check to see not whether their work is correct, but whether they gave it a good effort, whether they really attempted to complete the homework. If they gave a full effort, then I give them a stamp. If they gave a half-hearted attempt, they don't get the stamp. Now, the crazy thing is, these are teenagers. And just few weeks in to the year, and if they don't get the stamp, then they are demanding the stamp if they've done their work. And it really does work like a bomb. Now, I learned that from Miss S. She had a system where, firstly, if you were late for a class as a student, the door was locked. So it was actually quite dangerous. You'd be walking along the walkway, and the next minute you just see these children sprinting past you, trying to open their books as they're running. It was quite a weird sight. And you knew where they were running to. They were running to Miss S's class, her lab. And she would stand there, short little lady, and they had to take their books and they had to show her that they had done her homework. She would then stamp the book and she would allow them in. If they hadn't done their homework, they didn't get in to the class. They stayed outside and they did the homework for the rest of the lesson. She was very, very strict, but she was also an amazing teacher. Over and above her brilliant intellect, she was an extremely experienced and knowledgeable science teacher. And man, was she organized. She was the person who taught me the importance of having your own set of notes as a science teacher. That you don't just work out of a textbook. She had a textbook that she worked from, but layered on top of that, she had her own set of digital notes, summaries that she had created, which she packaged in accordance with her teaching style, and it was delivered to her students. Back then, we didn't have Google Classroom, so they would get photostated copies, hard copies, which they would have to cut out and stick into their notebooks. Her students always had brilliant notebooks, and they made sure that they guarded their notebooks with their lives. And it worked. It really worked. And so I learned the importance of having your own set of digital notes that you have compiled, because by compiling it yourself, it's your tool that you use in teaching your students. And I also learned the importance of concrete reinforcement and acknowledgement when your students do their homework. And it sounds a little bit infantile as stamping high school students' books. But the crazy thing is it works. But like operant conditioning, you do it enough times and people expect it and they see it as a reward. So she also was very tough on me as a young teacher, in that I got very involved with a lot of things very quickly and very early on in my high school teaching career. And she used to get very, very grumpy with me when my focus diverted away from science teaching. She said to me, she said, "Don, if you truly want to be a very good science teacher, you are going to have to make it priority. You are going to have to study. You're going to have to read up. You're going to have to prepare. You're going to have to read past what you teach. Read past the syllabus, because students are going to ask you questions where the answers are not in the textbook." And there were times when I was very grumpy with her. She was very hard on me. But I'm thankful for the fact that I had such a tough mentor. But it was also such a privilege to work with someone who had such an immense intellect. You know, when you used to speak to her about science and when she encountered problems, you could see that it was like a supercomputer that was solving the problems. It really was a treat. However, being so intelligent, it was sometimes difficult for her to accept some of the nonsense that us average people put forward as being rational. And other people didn't necessarily always understand her analysis, or her critical analysis of that which she did. But looking back, I'm so thankful for the fact that I had a privilege to work with her for, it was about 2 years, because she really did shape me as a teacher. And albeit that I don't think she necessarily initially saw the fruits of her hard work and discipline, that over the length of my teaching career, I actually did follow her advice, and she was right. So genius, she wasn't only an intellectual genius. She was actually, I'm going to say she was a genius teacher. She really got the max out of her students, and albeit that they didn't always find it pleasurable, at the end of the day when they got their results, they always said, wow, how privileged we were to have Miss S as our science teacher. And so thank you, Miss S. What a privilege it was to be trained by you.